Hey guys, Z-Muscle here, bringing you part 3 of the Wings Per Pony series. This is going to be the last video for the Becoming Mommy side story, and then we'll get right on to the main story. So, let's get started. Chapter 5. All in good fun. The autumn air was cold as the wind rushed past the trees, scattering the leaves left on the ground. Usually, on days like this, all the citizens of Ponyville would be inside trying to keep warm. Tonight, however, was no ordinary night. This was Nightmare Night. And for a certain rainbow-maned Pegasus, it was the perfect night to pull off one of her best pranks. The only thing holding her back was Clay, who was about to experience Nightmare Night for the first time.
"Come on, Clay, we're burning daylight here."
Dash called to her son as she tapped a hoof on the ground, slightly irritated.
I don't know about this, Mommy,"
said a small voice from behind a bedroom door.
"Every pony celebrates Nightmare Night. It's tradition. But every pony will look scary." "Clay, they're the same ponies you've known from Ponyville. They just look different."
Clay wasn't convinced. He sat on his bed looking out his window at all the ponies in costumes walking through the street. Clay hated being scared, and the fact that there was a whole day dedicated to a magical alicorn that would eat him if he didn't offer any candy didn't really help in the slightest.
"Come on, Clay. You get candy. You do still like candy, don't you?" "Yes." "And you don't want Nightmare Moon to gobble you up, don't you?" No." "Well, then get your costume on so we can go."
Clay sighed and got off the bed to get on his costume, which was a poorly made Wonderbolts jumpsuit with fake wings on the back and goggles without lenses. Clay stretched the goggles over his eyes and left his room, and headed downstairs where he found his mother waiting by the door.
"Now isn't that the cutest Wonderbolt in all of Equestria?"
Dash said, trying to boost his confidence. Clay smiled, but was soon startled by a knock at the door. Dash opened it to reveal Pinkie Pie in her chicken costume, with 2 colts and 2 fillies, one of whom he recognized as Dinky.
"Hey, Pinkie Pie!"
Clay ran up to give Pinkie a tight hug.
"Hiya, Clay! Ready to get some candy?" Yeah. Pinkie? There aren't any real monsters outside, are there?" "Well, of course not. Well, except for Nightmare Moon. But as long as we give her candy, she won't gobble you up like cupcakes or cookies. Or maybe even—"
Pinkie stopped when she saw the glare that Rainbow was giving her.
Don't worry, Clay. You'll be safe with your Aunt Pinkie Pie."
Clay looked back at Rainbow with a confused expression.
"Aren't you gonna wear a costume, Mommy?" "I'm not into the candy stuff anymore. I'm just gonna stay home tonight."
Clay's eyes widened.
You're not coming?" "Sorry, Clay, but I'm a little too old for that stuff."
Clay's eyes began to glisten.
"But I want to spend Nightmare Night with you, Mommy."
Dash's face fell as she saw her son's eyes filling with tears. She walked up to him and placed a hoof on his shoulder.
"I'll tell you what. You go with Pinkie Pie, and I'll see if I can catch up with you later, okay?" "Okay, Mommy."
Clay wiped the tears from his eyes. Dash smiled and ruffled his mane.
"Now behave and have fun." "I will, Mommy."
Clay ran off and joined Pinkie Pie and the others. Dash went back inside the house and gave a wicked grin as she went to a trunk in the living room and pulled out a Shadowbolt jumpsuit. This one wasn't like the one she wore when Princess Luna made her first appearance. This jumpsuit was the real thing. She had won it off a bet with a real Shadowbolt, and she was dying to use it as her costume tonight. Dash hadn't technically lied to Clay. She wasn't doing this for candy. She was doing this to have fun. Dash flew into her room and donned the jumpsuit, and then placed the yellow-lensed goggles over her eyes. Dash loved being a Wonderbolt, but she had to admit, as she inspected herself in the mirror, that dressing up as a Shadowbolt made her look cool. Even scary in the right light. Unlike the navy blue that the Wonderbolts wore, the Shadowbolts preferred the colors black and purple, and the logo itself was a skull and crossbones pattern. Dash grinned as she finished admiring herself and flew down the stairs and out the door.
"This is gonna be fun,"
she thought as she soared over the clouds. Dash had it all worked out. As soon as the nearest group of ponies walked right under a storm cloud, all she would have to do is give it a good kick, and the thunder would scare the horse apples out of them. It was an old prank, sure, but it was always good for a laugh. And besides, it was all good fun, wasn't it? Dash hid in the black cloud as she heard the sounds of hoof steps approach, and she waited for the right moment. She listened as the sounds drew closer, closer, closer. She picked her moment and gave the storm cloud a hard kick. She was rewarded with the loud crack of thunder and the sounds of screaming. Dash fell on her back, laughing hysterically.
This prank is still funny.
Dash caught her breath and looked over the cloud to see if the ponies had either run or wet themselves. Her eyes widened when she saw Pinky and the colts and fillies she was watching. She looked to the group and saw a tiny colt wearing a Wonderbolt's jumpsuit.
Clay.
Dash's heart began to sink as she saw him curled into a ball on the ground, whimpering. Dash landed on the ground and approached him, but before she could calm him down, he let out a loud scream.
Don't eat me!
Clay shouted at the Shadowbolt, tossing his candy at Dash. He ran as fast as he could towards home.
Clay, wait!
Dash took off after him, and soon found him banging on the door of their house.
Mommy, let me in, please! Nightmare Moon is gonna eat me! Don't let her get me, Mommy! Please don't let her get me! Mommy!
Dash landed behind the terrified colt and grabbed him, causing Clay to scream and kick, begging for his life.
Clay, calm down, it's me. Mommy. Mommy?
Clay stopped kicking and looked back at the Shadowbolt. She placed him on the ground and removed her goggles and hood. Clay looked at her confused and scared.
Why did you scare me, Mommy? I didn't mean to scare you, Clay. It was just a prank. A prank? Yeah, you know, a joke. It was supposed to be funny.
Clay looked like he was on the verge of tears.
It wasn't funny, Mommy. It was scary. I thought you were gonna eat me. Clay, I didn't mean to scare you. I'm sorry.
Clay backed away slightly, looking down at the ground.
You were really scary, Mommy. I know. I'm sorry, Clay.
Dash walked up to him and placed a hoof on his shoulder. Clay looked up at her, then hugged her tightly, and Dash returned the embrace. She felt sick for scaring Clay so badly. The prank was supposed to be all in good fun, but no prank, no matter how funny it was to her, was worth seeing her son so upset and frightened.
I want to go home,
he sobbed.
Okay,
Dash whispered, as she began to gently stroke his mane. Clay released Dash, and then realized something.
Oh no! I forgot to give Nightmare Moon my candy! Now she's gonna gobble me up!
Clay began to cry again, and Dash's heart began to break. That won't be necessary, a regal-sounding voice said behind Clay. Clay looked behind him to see a dark blue alicorn with a mane and tail that flowed elegantly.
Princess Luna?
Clay asked, bewildered. Yes, child, Luna replied in the same regal tone. The bounty has been so large this year. I do not think your candy will be necessary this nightmare night. Therefore, Nightmare Moon shall spare you tonight.
How did you know?
I have my ways, Luna said, winking to Rainbow Dash. You may go home, and sleep soundly tonight, child. Clay smiled as Luna spread her wings and took off into the night sky. Dash started to walk into the house when Clay spoke.
Mommy? Yes, Clay? I know that I don't have to give my candy to Nightmare Moon, but can I still get some candy with you?
Dash looked shocked.
Even after I scared you? I was scared, but I know you would never scare me on purpose, and I still want to spend Nightmare Night with you, Mommy.
Dash smiled, trying to fight back a tear.
I'd love to, Clay.
Clay walked up to Dash and nuzzled her leg.
Thanks, Mommy. You bet. Now come on. Nightmare Night is still young. Let's get some sweets.
Dash placed the hood and goggles over her head and ran after Clay. They went from house to house, spending Nightmare Night in the way it was meant to be spent. Together. Chapter 6. Rainbow Dash, the Wonderbolt.
Clay, I know you're upset, but Mommy can't stay home today. I have to go to work.
Dash looked down at the sad colt in front of her, feeling twinges of sadness and guilt as she looked into his brown eyes.
But I don't want you to go, Mommy. I know. And believe me, Clay, I want to stay home with you too. But the Wonderbolts need me to perform tonight.
Clay was not happy with her answer.
But today's Mother's Day. I won't even get to do anything with you. You'll be gone all day. Clay, I'm really sorry, but I can't take today off. Spitfire is the one in charge, and she needs me to be at Cloudsdale. Can't you just pretend to be sick like last time? I don't think I would get away with that again. And I don't want you pretending you're sick either. Got it?
Clay hung his head, depressed.
It's not fair,
he muttered angrily.
I know it's not. But I'm not the only mom working today. Dinky's mom is working late too. Maybe you two should get together and play. I don't want to play with Dinky. I want to play with you.
Dash began to rub her temples as she began to feel a migraine forming.
Clay, honey, I know that it isn't fair. And I know you want to spend time with me. I do too. But the fact is I have to go to work, or else I can't bring home bits so we can afford everything we have. Besides, your birthday's coming soon. Don't you want some new presents for your birthday?
Clay looked up at his mother, his lip quivering.
All I want for my birthday is for you to be home, Mommy.
Dash cocked an eyebrow.
You don't mean that, Clay. I do. That's all I want, Mommy.
Rainbow's heart was breaking into tiny fragments as tears began to stream down Clay's face. Trying to calm him down, she brought him in close with a foreleg and nuzzled his face.
I'll be home for your birthday. I'll even be up when you get up. I promise.
Clay looked like he was about to speak, but he had kept quiet, besides the occasional sniffle.
Aunt Fluttershy's gonna stop by later to babysit you, so I need you to behave yourself while I'm gone, okay? I will, Mommy. And I'm not a baby.
Dash chuckled.
I know you're not. Now go play while Mommy gets ready for work.
Clay slowly walked up to his room, while Dash followed behind. They both went to their rooms, keeping quiet for the next 30 minutes. Soon after, there was a knock at the door, and Clay was the first to answer. He opened the door to reveal a butterscotch Pegasus with pink hair.
Aunt Fluttershy,
Clay said excitedly.
Hello, Clay. My, you've gotten big since the last time I saw you.
Fluttershy whispered in her usual gentle, timid voice.
Uh-huh. I grew 3 inches. Oh my. Soon you'll be as big and strong as Big Mac. Really?
Clay asked, stunned.
Mm-hmm. By the way, is your mother still here? Yep, she's just getting her uniform.
Clay's face fell.
What's wrong, Clay? Today's Mother's Day. Oh, I see. Why does Mommy have to go to work? Why can't she stay here?
Fluttershy placed a hoof on Clay's cheek.
Sometimes mommies and daddies have to miss out on things with their kids because they have to, Clay. But why does she have to go?
Fluttershy looked at the heartbroken earth pony and gave him a gentle hug.
Clay, would it help if we pretended that I was your mommy? Just for today? It wouldn't be the same,
Clay said sadly.
I guess not. I'm not as assertive as Rainbow is.
As Fluttershy released Clay, Rainbow started to climb down the stairs.
Thanks, Fluttershy. Sorry I can't talk, but I need to get to Cloudsdale ASAP. It's no trouble, Rainbow. I love babysitting Clay.
Dash ruffled Clay's hair, then turned to open the door when something tugged at her back leg. She looked behind her to see Clay holding her leg tightly.
Clay, stop it.
She looked up at Rainbow's rosy eyes and said in a small voice,
I'll miss you, Mommy.
Rainbow blinked as he released her leg and looked to the ground. She turned to him, sat down, and gave him a tight hug, feeling his soft little body against hers.
I'll miss you too, Clay.
She kissed the top of his head and held the hug for a few more seconds before releasing him and standing back up. She gave his mane one last ruffle and then left the house, where the sounds of flapping wings were heard outside. Rainbow Dash had reached the stadium in Cloudsdale, where she and the other Wonderbolts would perform that day. She spotted Spitfire and started to walk over when she overheard a young filly Pegasus and her mother talking.
Do you like the tickets me and Daddy got for you, Mommy?
The filly squeaked.
I love them, sweetie. I can't believe you and your father actually managed to get Wonderbolts tickets for the 3 of us. Daddy said you always wanted to see the Wonderbolts, and I thought it'd make the perfect Mother's Day gift.
The mother Pegasus smiled at her daughter.
I love my gift, sweetie, but I already have a great Mother's Day gift. What's that, Mommy?
The filly asked curiously.
You.
The filly smiled and hugged her mother as she returned it.
I love you, Mommy. I love you too, Hummingbird,
the mother replied. As the 2 ponies hugged, Dash's chest began to tighten due to what she was witnessing. She thought of Clay for a few seconds and continued her walk to the back of the stadium with her head dropped slightly.
There you are, Rainbow Dash.
Are you ready for tonight's show?
Yeah, I guess,
Rainbow said unenthusiastically.
Wow, what's with you? I've never seen you so down before a show. I just have a lot on my mind right now.
Spitfire raised an eyebrow.
Well, I need you at your best today. So leave that personal stuff at the door, okay?
Dash gave a slight nod.
Good. Now come on, the others are already inside.
Spitfire pushed past the door, and Rainbow followed, still looking sadly at the floor as she entered. Dash was in the locker room with Spitfire and the other Mare Wonderbolts, putting on her uniform from her saddlebag. As she placed the goggles over her head, she placed the saddlebag in her locker, and was surprised when a piece of paper fell out and floated to the floor. Dash picked it up and sat on the bench so that she could unfold the paper. When she did, she saw it was a crudely drawn picture of a Pegasus Wonderbolt with a rainbow mane and tail, and beneath the Wonderbolt were bold, colorful letters that spelled Happy Mother's Day, Mommy. As Dash finished reading, her eyes began to fill with tears as she found it difficult to suppress the sobs that threatened to escape her throat. She had never thought much about Mother's Day before, mostly because it simply reminded her that she no longer had a mother. Yet right now, it was the only thing that was filling her mind as she sat on the bench. She didn't want to be here. She wanted to be with her son, telling him that she loved him, and playing games with him. Rainbow's sniffling caught the attention of Spitfire, who walked over to her co-worker and saw the picture in her hoof.
Rainbow, I'm sorry.
I shouldn't be here.
Dash sobbed.
I should be at home with my son.
Spitfire placed a hoof on Rainbow's shoulder and gave a sympathetic look.
I know it doesn't feel right, but we can't do this performance without you.
Dash wiped her eyes and placed the picture in her bag, then shut her locker. She put on her bravest face and left with Spitfire to perform. So far, the air show had gone off without a hitch. All that was needed was her sonic rainboom, and that would be the end of it. Dash soared as high as she could, and then began speeding back down to the ground. She pushed the wind barrier, causing a large colorful explosion, but she didn't stop. Instead, she kept going, and a few seconds later, a second sonic rainboom exploded from Dash as she left the rainbow streak in her wake. The crowd went wild as the second explosion expanded across the sky. Rainbow landed on the stadium with Spitfire and the other Wonderbolts and bid the crowd farewell. Spitfire and the others talked excitedly around Rainbow, not believing what they had witnessed.
Rainbow Dash, how did you do that?
Asked Surprise, a white and yellow Pegasus Wonderbolt. Dash's only response was a smile. As Spitfire and the others left the locker room, Dash stayed behind as she placed her jumpsuit into her saddlebag and placed it onto her back. She shut the door and then reached into the bag to pull out the drawing Clay had made her, and smiled at it as a tear began to run down her face.
That was for you, Clay,
she whispered. Dash placed it back into her bag and then left the locker room. As she left, she saw Soren, Spitfire, and several other Wonderbolts looking at her, smiling. Hey Dash, we're heading over to the Thunderdome to celebrate a great show and your double sonic rainboom. You want to come with us? Soren asked eagerly. Dash looked at her co-workers and smiled.
Sorry, guys, but I have other plans.
All the other ponies looked at her confused, except Spitfire, who smiled, knowing what she intended. Rainbow waved goodbye to the others, and then took off into the sky, flying home as fast as she could to the pony that mattered to her more than anything in Equestria. Soon, she was once again on solid ground, and before she knew it, the front door had flung open to have a small colt running up to her happily. Clay hugged her tightly, as she did the same.
I missed you, Mommy,
Clay said happily, as she continued hugging her.
I missed you too, Squirt,
Dash replied, a small tear running down her face.
I saw your picture.
She reached into her bag and pulled it out so he could see.
Do you like it?
Clay asked excitedly. To be honest, the words were misspelled. The lines weren't completely straight, and the Wonderbolt didn't look too much like her, save for the multicolored mane. But Dash simply smiled.
I love it, Clay.
She gave Clay a warm hug, and he returned it, a big grin on his face.
Happy Mother's Day, Mommy,
Clay said happily.
Thank you, Clay,
Dash whispered. The two ponies sat there, enjoying the hug, as the sun began to descend, leaving the sky in a beautiful orange. Epilogue. Sweet as cider. It was finally here. The time of the year that Rainbow looked forward to more than anything else. She relished in the taste that was only available that special time of year, and every pony knew nothing would stop her until she got a mug, normally. The problem was that every year, no matter how early she got there, Pinkie Pie would get ahead of her first, and buy a ridiculous amount of cider. Dash was pretty sure by now that it had something to do with their pinky sense. Today she had even less of a chance of obtaining cider, as she had to drop Clay off at school. Still, it was worth a shot. They had just reached the front of the school building, and Dash planned to head straight from there over to Applejack's.
Now behave for Miss Shirley and pay attention, okay, Squirt?
Dash looked down at the slightly tired Colt.
I will, Mommy. Promise.
Clay gave his mother a goodbye hug, and then walked off to meet up with his friend Dinky. Dash watched on for a few minutes, reflecting on how much Clay has grown over the years. She felt a deep sense of pride that she had gotten him this far in life.
Hello, Rainbow. Cider season. Now.
Dash shook her head as her inner voice shouted at her. Rainbow flew off into the skies and headed over to Sweet Apple Acres as fast as she could. Within minutes she could see the farm perched on top of the hill, and a small stand where Applejack would sell her heavenly cider.
Please don't be long, please don't be long, please don't be...
She stopped, and her eyes widened in horror, as she saw a line from the small stand all the way down the hill. But what really upset Dash was the fact that once again Pinky was at the front of the line.
How? How does she keep doing this?
Dash groaned and landed on the ground, taking her place in line.
This is gonna suck.
Dash muttered as she saw Pinky walking past her with at least 12 tankards of cider. The line moved at a snail's pace, and as time passed, more and more barrels of cider were replaced by Big Mac. Finally, it was almost her turn, and for once, there was a spare barrel left, which meant for the first time in years, Rainbow would finally get a cup of her favorite beverage. There were 3 ponies ahead of her, then 2, then 1. Her mouth began to water in anticipation as she imagined the sweet fluid in her mouth, but in the distance she heard the school bell ring, and she knew what that meant.
Oh no, no, it can't be time to pick up Clay already.
As if to answer, the bell rang again. She couldn't believe it. She was so close, only to have her desire ripped away from her.
1 cup, just 1 cup. Is that too much to ask for?
Dash grumbled as she saw it was her turn. You're next, R.D. It's right here waiting for you, Applejack said happily. Dash looked to the stand, then to the school in the distance. As she was being torn between choosing, she gritted her teeth in frustration and turned to Applejack.
Sorry, A.G. I gotta get Clay.
Applejack looked stunned at first, knowing how much Rainbow loved her apple cider, but then smiled and gave a small nod as Dash launched into the sky. Rainbow Dash landed at the school entrance, and immediately spotted Clay sitting on the steps with his saddlebag. Clay ran over and gave her a loving hug, and looked up at her, seeing her disappointment.
What's wrong, Mommy?
Clay asked.
Oh, I didn't get any cider, that's all.
Clay looked at his mother as if he was thinking, and then he ran off to his saddlebag. He picked up a cup sitting next to it and brought it over to her.
What's this?
Dash asked curiously as Clay held out the tankard.
It's a cup of Aunt Applejack cider.
Dash raised an eyebrow.
How could you have gotten a cup of cider when you were at school all day?
Aunt Pinkie Pie came over. I was waiting for you to pick me up, and I asked if I could have one of her cups, and she said yes.
Dash looked at the cup and then to Clay.
Honey, I can't drink this. It's yours.
Clay shook his head.
I want you to have it, Mommy. I keep hearing how much you like it, and you never get any of it, so I got it for you.
Clay brought the cup closer to Dash, smiling broadly. Dash looked at the cup again and took it in her hoof. She hesitated at first, but soon brought it to her lips, and it was met with the sweetest tasting cider she had ever had. Her lips curled into a smile as she gulped the beverage, before removing it from her mouth to lick her lips.
Is it good, Mommy?
Clay asked excitedly.
It's the best thing ever,
Dash said, still smiling.
Wow, I can't wait to try some myself.
Dash frowned slightly, knowing all too well there wouldn't be any cider for Clay until tomorrow. She looked down at the tankard and saw it was still half full. She then looked to Clay and smiled.
How about we share it?
Clay's eyes widened in excitement, and he shook his head as Dash handed him the mug. Clay took a few careful sips, testing the taste. After a few seconds, he licked his lips, and took another large sip.
Wow, this is the best drink ever!
Clay shouted happily as he handed the tankard over to his mother.
I know, right?
Dash took a few gulps and sighed happily.
Hey, Mommy, can you take me over to the park so I can play?
Sure thing, Squirt. It's the least I can do since you got me some cider.
Clay picked up his saddlebag and walked alongside his mother as they headed for the park, where he met Ditzy and played a short game of tag, while Dash sat and watched, making sure to never take his eyes off him this time. Celestia's sun began to set as Clay and Dash sat on top of a hill, taking in the beauty of the scene. Clay snuggled up to her and looked to the sunset.
I like sunsets, Mommy. It's so pretty.
Dash looked down at Clay, smiling.
Yeah, it is pretty, isn't it?
Clay rested his head on her side and sighed happily.
Mommy? Yes, Clay? Do you love me more than cider?
Dash chuckled as he looked at him.
You're sweeter than any cider Applejack could make.
Clay smiled and nuzzled Rainbow's sides as he started to shut his eyes.
Mommy?
Clay said sleepily. Dash replied, feeling tired herself.
Do you think someday I could fly like you?
Dash looked at the sleeping colt by her side and smiled.
I'm sure if you wanted it bad enough, someday you will fly like me.
Clay was now laying down on all fours with a big smile on his face.
Thanks, Mommy.
Dash smiled with dreamy eyes.
You're welcome, sweetie.
Dash rested on her front next to Clay and draped a wing over him like a blanket, and rested her head as she pulled Clay closer to her. As she watched Clay sleep, she began to remember the day she found him, and how at the time it seemed like she was making the biggest mistake of her life. But now, as she saw him sleeping peacefully under her wing, and felt the warmth of the sun on her face, she realized Clay was the most important and happiest decision she ever made. The start had been rough, and she doubted herself once in a while, but she wouldn't trade that day she found Clay for anything in all of Equestria. After all, she was now his mommy, now and forever.